Hi.
I used to believe life had a formula. You go to school, you work hard, you find love, you build a family, and you grow old together. That was supposed to be my path. I thought I was doing everything right. Good job, loving wife, nice house, we were the couple everyone envied. Or at least, that's what I thought. My wife, Emily, was the kind of woman who could light up a room just by walking in. Everyone loved her, my friends, my family, even random strangers. She had this way of making you feel like the most important person in the world. And I fell for it. Hard. For years, I built my life around her. Every decision I made, every sacrifice, I did it for us. But Emily, she had a different plan. Looking back, the signs were there. The late nights at work, the sudden interest in fitness, even though she always hated the gym, the way her phone was always face down. But love makes you blind, and I ignored it all. Then came the dinner party. That was the night everything changed. We were at a company event, one of those formal gatherings where everyone pretends to enjoy awkward small talk. That's when I met Alex Wilson. Charming, confident, the kind of guy who could sell water to a fish. He worked with Emily, and I'd heard his name before, always in passing, always with a little too much excitement in her voice. At first, I brushed it off. I wasn't the jealous type. But the way they interacted that night? The whispers, the stolen glances, the way her laugh was just a little too enthusiastic when he spoke? It planted something in my gut. Suspicion. It wasn't full-blown paranoia, not yet. But for the first time, I started paying attention. And what I found shook me to my core. A few nights later, I told Emily I was heading out for a late meeting. I parked 2 streets away from our house and waited. Sure enough, at 9:47 p.m., a car pulled up. Alex. She didn't even hesitate. She walked right out, got into his car, and they drove off. That was the moment my world ended. But if Emily thought she had broken me, she had no idea who she was dealing with. Because I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't confront her. I disappeared. And when I came back years later, I had one goal. Revenge. The night I saw Emily get into Alex's car, something inside me snapped. But not in the way you'd expect. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I didn't barge into that car and demand answers. No, I sat there in the dark, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white, and I made a decision. I was done. I didn't need an explanation. I didn't need her lies. The moment she made that choice, the moment she stepped into that car, she killed everything we had. So, I did something most people wouldn't. I vanished. That night, I drove straight to the airport. No suitcase, no plan. Just my wallet, my passport, and the weight of a shattered life. I booked the first international flight I could find, one way, no return. I didn't tell a soul. Not my friends, not my family. I left my phone on the counter at home, knowing Emily would find it and wonder where I was. Let her wonder. For the first time in years, I felt in control. I landed in Thailand the next morning. I picked Thailand because it was the first flight out, but it didn't matter where I went. I just needed to be anywhere but there. And for the next few years, I lived like a ghost. I didn't use my old name. I found work under the table, bartending, fixing boats, odd jobs that paid just enough to survive. I lived in hostels, in cheap apartments, sometimes in the back of my truck when I made it to Australia. I learned to disappear, to blend in. And slowly, I became someone else. But the anger never left. At night, I'd lay awake, picturing Emily and Alex in our house, living our life, probably telling everyone that I just ran off like some coward. Maybe she played the victim, saying I had some sort of midlife crisis and abandoned her. Maybe she told everyone I was the bad guy. The thought ate at me. But I stayed patient. I knew one thing for sure, one day, I'd come back. And when I did, I'd make sure Emily regretted every single second of what she did. For 3 years, I was a ghost. No social media, no bank transactions, nothing that could trace me back to my old life. I became a different person, someone stronger, colder, smarter. Someone who knew how to play the long game. But no matter how far I ran, one thought kept gnawing at me. What if she got away with it? What if Emily and Alex were living happily ever after, thinking I was out of the picture for good? What if she never felt even an ounce of guilt for what she did? I couldn't let that happen. So, after 3 years, I finally broke my silence. I sent one message. It wasn't to Emily. No, that would have been too easy. Too obvious. Instead, I sent it to Mark, my old college friend. He was one of the few people I trusted before everything fell apart, and I knew he wouldn't spill anything. The message was simple. Still breathing. What's new in town? It took him less than 5 minutes to reply. Dude. Holy crap. Where have you been? I ignored the question. Instead, I asked the one thing that really mattered. Emily. What's the story? Mark went silent for a while. Then, finally, his response came through. Man, you're not gonna believe this. My heart pounded as I waited for the next message. She married him. Alex. A year after you left. I exhaled slowly. I should have expected it. It made sense. They probably thought I was dead or some lost cause. Of course, they got married. Of course, they made it official. But that wasn't the part that made my blood run cold. She's got a kid now. A kid. For a second, I just stared at the screen, my mind racing. Was it his? Was there even a chance it was mine? Had she been pregnant when I left? I needed more. Tell me everything, I typed back. And Mark did. Emily and Alex had a son, about 2 years old now. They lived in the same house, my house. She had changed jobs, started working for a different firm, and from the outside, their life looked picture perfect. But then Mark added something else. Not gonna lie, dude. She doesn't seem happy. That made me pause. What do you mean? I asked. Mark hesitated before answering. I ran into her a few months ago. She looked tired. Like, really tired. You remember how she used to be all bubbly and full of life? That's gone. It's weird. She's still got the fake smile, but it doesn't reach her eyes anymore. Interesting. Maybe life with Alex wasn't the fairy tale she imagined. Maybe the guilt had started to eat at her. Or maybe, just maybe, she was hiding something. Either way, I knew one thing for sure. It was time to come home. I booked my flight that same night. No hesitation, no second guessing. 3 years had been long enough. It was time for Emily to know that ghosts don't just disappear. Sometimes, they come back. The plane touched down in my hometown just after midnight. The air smelled the same, the streets looked the same, but I wasn't the same. The man who left was broken, humiliated. The man who returned? He was focused. Calculated. Ready. I didn't go home, not yet. I didn't have a home anymore. Instead, I checked into a quiet motel on the outskirts of town, a place where no one would think to look for me. I needed to move carefully. If Emily and Alex thought I was dead or gone for good, then I had an advantage. For the first 2 days, I stayed in the shadows. Watching. Learning. Emily still worked her office job. Alex, the corporate golden boy, had moved up in his company. They looked stable. But that's all it was, a look. Because Mark was right. Emily didn't shine the way she used to. She moved through life like someone just going through the motions. Forced smiles. Long sighs when she thought no one was looking. A woman who had everything but still wasn't happy. And Alex? He was still his smug, polished self. But I noticed something different about him too. He was keeping secrets. Twice, I saw him leave work early, checking over his shoulder before slipping into a bar across town. He never drank much, just one, sometimes two. But he was always meeting someone. A woman. A blonde. Not Emily. That's when I knew. Karma wasn't just coming for Emily. It was coming for Alex, too. But I wasn't ready to reveal myself yet. No, that would have been too easy. Too simple. I wanted them to feel what I felt. The paranoia. The unease. The slow, creeping realization that something was coming for them. So, I started small. The first thing I did was visit my house. Their house. At 3 a.m., when the whole neighborhood was asleep, I parked down the street and walked toward the place I used to call home. The porch light was still the same. The windows were dark. But as I got closer, I noticed something in the yard. A garden gnome. It was ugly. Hideous, really. The kind of thing Emily would never have chosen on her own. It screamed Alex. That's when the anger hit me. This was my home. The place I built. The place I loved. And now it had some ridiculous gnome sitting in the front yard like a cheap decoration. So, I took it. Yep. Just picked it up and walked off with it like it was mine, because, in a way, it was. And the next morning, I left it right in front of Alex's office building. Right by his parking spot. A little message. A little reminder. Something's coming. And this? This was just the beginning. The next morning, I sat in my car across from Alex's office, sipping my coffee like it was just another ordinary day. But it wasn't. Today was the first move in a game only I knew we were playing. At exactly 8:15 a.m., Alex's sleek black sedan pulled into the parking lot. He stepped out, all confidence and polish, adjusting his tie like he owned the world. Then he saw it. The gnome. I watched as he paused, his brow furrowing. He looked around, scanning the area, his jaw tightening. He didn't pick it up right away. He just stood there, staring at it, like his brain was trying to make sense of how it got there. Good. Let him wonder. After a minute, he shook his head and grabbed the gnome, shoving it into his trunk like it was radioactive. He looked around one last time before heading into the building. I smiled. The seed had been planted. Now, it was time to water it. That night, I took things a step further. I waited until I knew Emily and Alex were home, lights on, settled in, their perfect little family life in motion. Then I slipped into their backyard. Everything was different. The patio furniture wasn't ours. The old oak tree where I used to drink my morning coffee? Gone. Replaced by a plastic playset for their kid. My house. My yard. Their life. It should have made me angry. Maybe the old me would have lost it, would have stormed in demanding answers. But I wasn't here for answers. I was here for revenge. I reached into my pocket and pulled out an old key, my key. I hadn't used it in years, but I never got rid of it. Maybe a part of me always knew I'd come back. I walked up to the back door. Slid the key into the lock. Turned. Click. Still worked. I didn't go inside. Not yet. That would come later. For now, I had something better planned. I took my phone out, snapped a picture of their back door, unlocked, slightly open, and sent it from an untraceable number. Emily's phone buzzed inside the house. 5 seconds later, the back light flipped on. The door swung open. Hello? Her voice was sharp, uncertain. She stepped out onto the patio, clutching her phone, eyes scanning the yard. I stayed hidden in the shadows, watching. She checked the lock, pulled the door shut, and stood there, arms crossed, rubbing her shoulders like she was suddenly cold. Then she hurried back inside, locking the door behind her. Good. Be afraid. Because I was just getting started. Emily didn't sleep that night. I know because I watched. From my car down the street, I had the perfect view of our bedroom window. The light stayed on much later than usual. Every so often, I'd see a shadow pass by, pausing, then moving again. She was rattled. Good. Around 2 a.m., she finally shut the light off. But I doubted she got much rest. That was the thing about guilt, it didn't let you sleep. The next morning, I made my second move. I walked into the cafe where Emily used to get her morning coffee. It was still the same wooden counter, same menu, same smell of fresh espresso in the air. I ordered black coffee, took a seat by the window, and waited. At exactly 7:45 a.m., she walked in. She looked different. Not bad, just older. A little more tired, a little less polished than the woman I remembered. She still carried herself with that same confident stride, but there was something missing now. That sparkle, that charm, gone. She didn't notice me at first. She was too busy scrolling on her phone, probably texting Alex about the creepy message she got last night. But when she turned to grab her drink, our eyes met. For a second, she just froze. Her fingers clenched around her cup, her lips parting slightly like she was about to say something, but no words came out. I just gave her a small, knowing smile. Not a friendly one. Not a threatening one. Just enough to make her think. Then I stood up, tossed a few bills on the table, and walked out. I didn't look back. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. Her. I let it ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then silence. A text came through seconds later. Where have you been? I smiled. She was already breaking. But I wasn't ready to answer her yet. No, she needed to stew in it a little longer. So instead of replying, I sent her something else. A single picture. The gnome. Back in their yard. Right by the front door. I could only imagine the look on her face when she saw it. Because this time, I wasn't the one who disappeared. She was. Emily didn't text again. She called twice, both times from a blocked number. I let them go to voicemail. She was panicking now. Good. I spent the morning at a small diner across town, enjoying the best pancakes I'd had in years. It was almost funny how normal everything felt, just another guy having breakfast. Meanwhile, Emily was probably pacing the house, gripping her phone, trying to decide what to do next. By noon, I decided to check in on Alex. He was easy to find. Same office. Same routine. At exactly 12:30 p.m., he stepped out for lunch. Alone. Interesting. Instead of heading to the usual spots near his office, he drove across town to a quieter restaurant. The kind of place you go when you don't want to be seen. I parked a few spots away and watched from a distance. 5 minutes later, she showed up. The blonde woman. The one I had seen him meet before. She walked in casually, not checking her surroundings like she had something to hide, but Alex? He kept glancing around, shoulders tense. Gotcha. I snapped a few photos with my phone. Nothing too obvious, just enough. Alex leaning in. The woman touching his arm. A secret little smile passing between them. Emily, you betrayed me first. But your perfect husband? He's betraying you now. I could have sent the photos right then. Could have blown up her world in a single message. But where's the fun in that? No, Emily needed to suffer a little longer. So instead, I sent her a different picture. One from years ago. One I hadn't looked at since the day I left. It was our wedding day. Me, standing at the altar, smiling like an idiot. Emily, in her perfect white dress, slipping the ring onto my finger. I sent it without a caption. Just let it sit there, waiting. It took her 4 minutes to respond. Emily, why are you doing this? No anger. No confusion. Just that one question. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed my first reply since coming back. Me, why did you? She didn't answer right away. Maybe she didn't know how. But I knew she would. Because this was only the beginning. Emily didn't text back. Not right away. I pictured her sitting in the living room of our house, phone in hand, staring at the screen, trying to figure out what to say. Trying to figure out how much I knew. Because that's the thing about guilt, it turns your own mind against you. And I was going to use every bit of it against her. That evening, I took things one step further. I drove by their house around 8 p.m., parking a few streets away. The lights were on. The curtains in the living room were open just enough for me to see inside. Emily was pacing. Alex was sitting on the couch, looking frustrated, rubbing his temples while she talked. Argued, more like. I wished I could hear them. Was she telling him I was back? Was she accusing him of something? Or was she just unraveling, letting her paranoia do the work for me? Whatever it was working. At 10 p.m., I got another text from her. Emily, please. Let's just talk. Oh, now she wanted to talk. I let her wait a little, then sent another picture. This one wasn't of the gnome. Wasn't of our wedding. It was of Alex. With the blonde. Not kissing. Not touching. Just sitting together, looking a little too comfortable with each other. Then I waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 3. Emily, what is this? I smirked. She already knew. But I wanted her to say it. Me, look familiar? Silence. Then, Emily, where did you get this? She wasn't denying it. That told me everything. Me, your husband has secrets too. Just like you. That was the last thing I sent before turning my phone off for the night. Let her sit with that. Let her doubt. Let her wonder if the life she betrayed me for was already crumbling. Because the best revenge? It's letting them destroy themselves. The next morning, I turned my phone back on and wasn't surprised to see 5 missed calls from an unknown number. Emily. She was spiraling. Good. No texts, though. Which meant she wanted to talk in person. She needed answers, control, some way to get ahead of this. But that's the thing, she wasn't in control anymore. I was. At noon, I decided to check in on Alex again. I parked a block away from his office and waited. Like clockwork, he left for lunch at 12:30 p.m. But this time, he wasn't meeting his blonde friend. He went home. I followed, keeping a safe distance, and watched as he pulled into the driveway. Emily was already waiting on the front porch. Arms crossed, foot tapping, pure tension in her stance. This was it. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could see it all unfold. Emily waving her phone in his face, probably my message, my photo. Alex's confused expression at first, then frustration. He shook his head, ran a hand through his hair, but she didn't let up. She was accusing him. Doubting him. And Alex? He wasn't denying it. Not the way an innocent man would. I watched as he tried to explain something, but Emily just turned away, rubbing her temples like she was holding back tears. Alex stepped closer, reaching for her shoulder, but she flinched. She didn't trust him anymore. All it took was one picture. One tiny crack. And soon? The whole foundation would collapse. That evening, I sent Emily another text. Me, still think you made the right choice? She saw it immediately. 3 dots appeared, then stopped. Then started again. Then stopped. She didn't know what to say. So I helped her out. Me, let's meet. She hesitated. Then, finally. Emily, where? I gave her a location. The cafe where we first met all those years ago. She agreed. Tomorrow morning. She had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I arrived at the cafe early. Sat at a corner table, back to the wall, full view of the entrance. Old habits die hard. I didn't have to wait long. At exactly 8:02 a.m., Emily walked in. She hesitated at the door, scanning the room until her eyes landed on me. For a second, she just stood there, gripping her purse, taking a slow breath like she needed to steady herself. She looked different up close. Not in a bad way, just older. Tired. Like the weight of the world had finally caught up to her. Like guilt had eaten away at her for years. Good. She made her way over, sat down across from me. No smile. No fake charm. Just raw nerves. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, I didn't think I'd ever see you again. Her voice was quiet. Almost careful. I stirred my coffee. Disappointed? She flinched. Just a tiny bit, but I caught it. No, she swallowed, glancing at her hands. I don't understand why now. I leaned back in my chair, watching her. Why did you do it? She looked up sharply, blinking. What? Why did you cheat, Emily? I kept my voice calm. Steady. Why did you throw everything away? Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Like she wasn't expecting the direct question. Like she hadn't prepared for it. Good. She exhaled, staring at the table. It wasn't that simple. It was for me. Her jaw tightened. She stopped, then shook her head. I was selfish. I was stupid. I know that. And I know there's nothing I can say to make it right. I raised an eyebrow. You think I want an apology? Silence. She bit her lip. I don't know what you want. I smiled. Good. Because that meant she was afraid. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Tell me, Emily, did it turn out the way you thought it would? She hesitated. What do you mean? I mean your perfect little life. With Alex. The house. The kid. I tilted my head. Are you happy? That hit something. I saw it in her eyes. A flicker of doubt. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. Do you trust him? She stiffened. I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen, and slid it across the table. She glanced down. Her breath hitched. The picture of Alex and the blonde. She stared at it for a long time. Her hands trembled. Then she looked up at me. And for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. She wasn't just afraid of losing her marriage. She was afraid because she finally understood. She betrayed me first. But now? It was her turn to feel what it was like to have everything ripped away. Emily sat there, staring at the photo, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table like she needed something to hold on to. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time, pure, helpless panic. Where did you get this? Her voice was barely above a whisper. I leaned back, crossing my arms. Does it matter? She swallowed hard. It could be nothing. It could just be. Oh, don't do that. I cut her off, shaking my head. Don't play the fool, Emily. You know what this is. You know what he's doing. Her hands trembled as she set the phone down, pushing it away like she couldn't stand to look at it any longer. Why are you showing me this? I let that question hang in the air for a second. Then I shrugged. Because you deserve to know. The same way I deserve to know. She inhaled sharply, like I had slapped her. Good. Let it sink in. For years, she had lived comfortably in her betrayal, thinking she had made the right choice, that she had traded up. And now, for the first time, she was seeing the cracks in her perfect little world. Now she knew what it felt like. She didn't say anything for a while. Just sat there, staring at the table, breathing unsteadily. Then she whispered, I thought he loved me. I didn't smile, didn't gloat, didn't say, now you know how it feels. Because I didn't need to. She was already living it. After a long silence, she finally looked up. What do you want from me? There it is. I could see it in her eyes, she was waiting for the punishment. The ultimatum. The revenge move. Maybe she thought I was going to blackmail her, demand money, demand she confess everything to the world. But I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, and simply said, nothing. That broke her. She blinked, completely caught off guard. Nothing? I nodded. I don't want anything from you, Emily. I just wanted you to know. She stared at me like she didn't understand, like that answer was worse than anything she had imagined. Like it made her feel completely powerless. She thought I came back to destroy her. But I had already won. Because from this moment on, I didn't have to do anything. Her own paranoia would eat her alive. Her own doubt would ruin her marriage. Her own choices would come back to haunt her. She betrayed me first. And now? She would destroy herself. Emily didn't say anything for a long time. She just sat there, breathing unevenly, her eyes darting between me and the phone on the table, like she was waiting for me to say more, to do more. But I didn't. Because I had already done enough. She finally swallowed hard. So that's it? I raised an eyebrow. What else were you expecting? She exhaled shakily, rubbing her temples. I don't know. I don't understand why you came back after all this time. If you didn't want anything, why do this? I took a sip of my coffee, watching her carefully. Then I set the cup down and said, because I wanted you to feel it. She froze. I leaned in slightly. I wanted you to wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, wondering if everything you built was about to fall apart. She didn't move. I wanted you to question everything. To feel that paranoia. That doubt. That regret. Her breathing hitched. I wanted you to know exactly what it felt like when you did this to me. That was it. That was the moment her whole world came crashing down. Because I saw it in her eyes. The regret. The shame. The realization that, for the first time in years, she wasn't the one in control anymore. And that was my revenge. She leaned back in her chair, hands shaking. She stopped, swallowed, then tried again. I never wanted to hurt you. I let out a dry laugh. Well, you did. And guess what? I survived. She looked away, blinking rapidly, like she was fighting tears. But I didn't care. She didn't get to cry. She didn't get to be the victim. Not after everything she did. Finally, she whispered, I was wrong. I tilted my head. About what? She sucked in a shaky breath. All of it. Leaving you. Choosing him. Thinking it would make me happy. I watched her carefully. She meant it. But the truth was, it didn't matter anymore. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her guilt. Because she had to live with it now. Not me. So I picked up my phone, slid it into my pocket, and stood up. Goodbye, Emily. Her eyes widened slightly. Wait. But I was already walking away. I didn't need to see how this ended. Because it wasn't my problem anymore. As I walked out of the cafe, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Emily was already drowning in her own regret, and nothing I said or did could make it worse than what was already happening in her head. For years, I imagined what this moment would feel like. Confronting her. Watching her realize the life she betrayed me for was built on lies. But now that it was over? I just felt free. I spent the next few days watching things fall apart from a distance. Emily didn't try to contact me again. She didn't have to. The damage was done. But Alex? He was slipping. The first crack came when I followed him after work. Instead of going home, he drove straight to the blonde woman's apartment. Didn't even hesitate. He was comfortable. Too comfortable. Which meant this had been going on for a while. I snapped a few more pictures. Him parking, walking inside, the way she greeted him with a kiss just inside the doorway. Gotcha. I could have sent them to Emily right then. Could have blown up their marriage in a single click. But where's the fun in that? Instead, I mailed the pictures. Printed. In an envelope. No return address. No text messages. No warnings. Just cold, undeniable proof. I wasn't there when Emily opened the envelope. But Mark texted me later that night. Mark, dude. Alex got kicked out. Emily lost it. Threw his clothes on the lawn. Even broke a lamp. I smirked. Checkmate. Alex lasted 2 days before he came crawling back. Mark told me everything. How Alex showed up at the house late at night, standing on the porch like some lost puppy, knocking and begging Emily to talk. How she stood there, arms crossed, watching him with pure hatred in her eyes. She didn't let him in. She didn't even argue. She just shook her head and closed the door in his face. And that? That was the moment I knew. Emily was broken. Not because of me. Because of herself. She destroyed her marriage twice. First by betraying me. Then by trusting a man who was never going to be loyal to her. It was almost poetic. The next day, I drove by the house one last time. Emily was outside, sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, staring blankly at the street. The same spot she used to sit in when we lived there together. Except now, she was alone. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. I didn't even slow down. Because I wasn't that guy anymore. This wasn't my life. Not anymore. That night, I got one final text from her. Emily, was this your plan all along? I thought about it for a long time. Then I typed my final message. Me, no. But it was exactly what you deserved. Then I blocked her number. Forever. The morning after I sent that final text, I woke up feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. No anger. No bitterness. No need for revenge. Because it was done. Emily had lost everything, her husband, her perfect life, the illusion she had built in her head. And the best part? I didn't even have to destroy her. She did it all by herself. A few days later, Mark called me. Mark, so, what now? I knew what he meant. I had spent years running from my past, consumed by the betrayal, driven by this need to make her feel what I felt. But now that it was over? I finally understood. Emily was just a chapter in my life. One that ended a long time ago. And it was time to start a new one. So I took one last drive around town. Passed by the places that used to mean something to me, the house, the cafe, the park where we once talked about our future. None of it held any weight anymore. Then, I headed straight to the airport. No looking back. No hesitation. Because the past was exactly where it belonged. Behind me.
Bye.